All right, let's talk about checkboxes and parsing. You might not need to make a project. You probably can just follow me. I'm going to try to make this real quick because there's not much we can do with the checkbox, as you're going to quickly learn here. All right, checkbox is the final control we're going to be adding to our forms for Unit 1. So if I double click the checkbox or I click and drag, here's a checkbox. Name of a checkbox, CHK. That's a good prefix. Check. I'll call this CHK1 just because I don't really have anything to specify it yet. Checkbox. What can you do to a checkbox? Well, you can check it and you can uncheck it. You got two options. Yes or no. On, off. And you can have multiple checkboxes. So I could bring in another one. Name. Check 2. Checkboxes work really good with if statements, and we're not quite there yet. So we're kind of limited in what we can do with the checkbox. I like the classic, you check them on and you can't check them off. That's kind of what I like. I'll show you how that works here. Because we need to use if statements to check if it's been checked or if it has not been checked. And unfortunately, we don't really have events that can do that for us without if statements. And we don't want if statements yet. We're too early. We'll save if statements for a month or so from now. So here's your checkbox. So what can I do with a checkbox? Well, they pair really nice with labels. So can I bring a label here? And maybe a second label here. And I'll go ahead and call this one LBL1. And I'll call this one LBL2. And I will put empty text in them to begin. So nothing we haven't seen before. So let's look at these checkbox events. There's quite a lot of them. I think the one we're only going to use is check changed, I think it's called. So if you... This might as well be our, if you've checked the checkbox events, whatever you want to happen, you put in here. I don't think there's any other cool ones we can use. I wish there was like a check on and a check off, but unfortunately that's not really how events work. Just taking a double check. All right, check changed. So basically, if I click this checkbox, what do I want to happen? Well, bring a check change event in. If I click that text box, let's put some text in my label. So I'm going to say, you checked the checkbox. Easy enough. So if I hit this checkbox, boom, you check the checkbox. What I can also do is maybe I should be a little bit better. Maybe let's change the text of this checkbox. Let's change the text to no. So my checkbox is no, and if I click on the checkbox, it says you've checked the checkbox. Nothing crazy going on so far. How about if I check the checkbox, my checkbox should say yes instead of no, because that kind of looks stupid. So for example, when I click the checkbox, I want it to say yes. So how could I do that? Well, in your check change event for your text box, you can change the text of your checkbox. So you can go check1.text equals yes. So when I check that checkbox, the text of that checkbox is going to change as well. So no becomes yes as soon as I press it. And my label changes as well. Now, one last thing. What if I want to disable this checkbox? What if when I press yes, I don't want to touch it anymore? Because my coding only works for basically one check, because I don't know anything about if statements yet. So how about if I press that checkbox, I want to just disable it and you can't touch it anymore. You're stuck with that option. So what could I do? Well, I haven't really talked about this option or this property. It's called the enabled property. And the enabled basically lets your control, can you interact with your control or not? So by default, all of our controls are enabled, but you'll see what happens. If I turn the enabled property to be false, I can no longer interact with that control. So right now, when I hit that checkbox, these two things are going to happen, but I'm also going to disable the checkbox by setting the enabled property to be false. So let's see how that looks. No becomes yes. And notice how my checkbox is not interactable anymore. I cannot interact with it. That's because it is not enabled. And that's really all we can do with checkboxes right now. Okay, one last thing, parsing. Let's say I've got a label with text 10, a label that just says 10. And let's say I have another label that says 20. So I'm just going to call this LBL10. And I'm going to call this LBL20. Let's say I got a third label. LBL sum. What is a sum? Sum is numbers added up. So the sum of anything is what you're adding up. So 10 plus 20 is 30. I want to display that sum in this label. So how about when I check this text box, I want this label to display 10 plus 20 equals 30. So I want this label to say 30. So how do I do that? Well, let's go into our checkbox. Let's just erase that so we can focus on parsing. So my label sum dot text, I want it to say the sum is, and then what is the sum? Well, I want to take this and plus it to that, 10 plus 20. So how could I do that? Well, I could say the sum is, and that string, plus label 10, whatever text is in label 10, holy moly, plus the text that's in label 20. So the sum is the text of those two labels put together. So 10 plus 20 should give me 30. What happens here? I'm going to run my program. So I hit this checkbox, boom. The sum is literally 1020. So what happened there? Well, the text that's inside your labels is just that. It's just text. Your computer doesn't know that it's numbers. It's just symbols and letters to your computer right now. So you can't do math with just letters. What's H plus H? I don't know. Well, 2H, but you know what I mean? The computer just thinks that these are just words right now. So if you actually want to do some math with this text, you got to change it into a number to do the math. So how do we do that? Well, what you have to do is you have to parse it. And what are we parsing it to? Well, we're parsing it to an integer. So you're going to take that text that's in that label and you're going to parse it to an integer. We don't need to know what an integer is at this point. We just need to know that an integer is a number. So we're taking whatever text is inside that label and we're trying to convert it to an integer, which is a number. I guess we should do the same with the other text. int.parse. So we're taking that label's text and we're trying to parse it to an integer through that method. Now, hopefully, when I hit that checkbox, ooh, I forgot a bracket. If you're doing math, we need to basically put all of the math inside these brackets. So you've got this, which we just wrote, and then make sure you put a pair of outside brackets on there. And obviously you don't need all these spaces. I'm just showing you what's up here. Okay, this should work now. The sum is 30. Why is it 30? Well, because we took the text of 10 and we took the text of 20. We tried to convert it to an integer, and 10 plus 20 is 30. There's a quick little intro to parsing. Kind of confusing, I know, but we're at the end of the unit, so this won't be on a test. Parsing is not on the test, and checkboxes will not be on the test.